Mega Man X5. What can I say? It's the topic of today's Quickies Don't Cut It, and what's immediately worth pointing out is the time gap between the releases of X4 and X5 in Japan. August 1st, 1997 and November 30th, 2000 respectively. That's well over 3 years. A tad unusual for the Mega Man franchise then, to say the least, with games often coming out on an annual basis. For how long X5 had actively been in development is something I wasn't able to find clear information on, but the larger the time frame between two installments, the better the final product should turn out, right? Especially because lead artist Kaiji Inafune intended for Mega Man X5 to be the concluding chapter to the X lineup. You'd have expectations for a great, worthy swan song. Well, according to the internet, Mega Man X5 received more or less the same lukewarm scores amongst critics as X4, but the general sentiment amongst fans seems to be that X5 marked the start of a substantial decline in quality. Plenty of people still enjoy the title for what it is, but others have mixed feelings or hate the thing altogether. Isn't that so, my dear Exo Paradigm Gamer? Alright then, allow me to make my case in 3, 2, 1. A couple of months after the events of Mega Man X4, the persistent Sigma virus has got itself into a new head and challenges X and Zero to a battle. By intentionally losing to the duo, Sigma's head explodes with the virus spreading across the Earth, causing Reploids all over to go maverick. Making matters worse is that the nearby space colony, which is sent on a crashing course to annihilate the entire planet within 16 hours. Now I know where Sonic Adventure 2 a year later got its main plot device from. By this Dynamo guy, hired by, of course, Sigma. Facing their most apocalyptic challenge yet, the few remaining Maverick Hunters need to find upgrade parts for a large old particle cannon dubbed the Enigma to increase its success rate of destroying the space colony. Self-explanatory, that is where you as the player come in, but before we get to any of the gameplay stuff, I want to say the story is an improvement this time around. I still don't like how these new technicians that work together with X and Zero, consisting of Alia, Cygnus, and Douglas, again sort of exist without proper introduction, but they're never portrayed as important or emotionally involved characters like Iris was, and the rest of the events are fairly well written. You can make sense of most of what's going on if you've played Mega Man X4. The Sigma showdown there limits you to wrecking 2 of his bodies, making it believable that the virus itself ends up in another body in X5. The game also explains how Sigma's original intention with letting his head explode was to turn Zero into a Maverick, but because the amount was insufficient, he asked the Master of Trolls, Dynamo, love this guy's attitude and appearance by the way, to let the hugely infected space colony collide with Earth. Yes, Sigma was willing to bring the whole planet to ruins in an attempt to return Zero to his quote-unquote true self. What exactly that means though is something you'll need a solid understanding of Mega Man lore for. Early on in Mega Man X4, it is revealed Wily created Zero, and if you've played Mega Man 8, you'll probably come to realize that the purple energy resources from Dr. Wily are actually the Sigma virus. Now, that dance and scream act between Zero and Sigma in X4 suddenly seems to serve a purpose after all. Zero was the original carrier of the virus and it was transferred over to Sigma at the end of the battle, but the scene doesn't stipulate on that well at all. I didn't have a clue that was going on until X5, with Cygnus theorizing that Zero has created antibodies against the virus, clearing up what gives that Zero is so resistant against it. I think that is easily the vaguest part about the story in Mega Man X5, but overall I was quite engrossed with it. The narrative really has a tone of grittiness and finality to it, with the Earth being in grave danger and Zero's ultimate demise. The lack of voiced characters this time around was also a wise decision. There may no longer be anime-esque FMVs, instead everything is presented through text and pictures, but I feel any and all emotional weight the event here may pack would have been completely lost with X4's atrocious voice acting over them. To get back to the story itself, however, how X continues onwards after Zero dies can go in one of 2 ways in a single playthrough. Assuming the space colony and the Earth have an intercourse party, X's memory of Zero specifically are deleted by some kind of Dr. Light holograph to reduce the emotional pain. If the intercourse party was prevented, on the other hand, X is seen with the Z-Saber, proudly taking on Zero's role role of leader of the Maverick Hunters. The former is considered the bad ending, while the latter is considered the good ending, but I feel it's up to interpretation which is actually a better outcome. Besides, I personally like the events that lead up to the bad ending more. Witnessing that Evil Zero sent chills down my spine, and when X says he never properly knew his best friend, it's so sad, yet it seems so appropriate since Zero was created by Dr. Wily, and the previous installments just seemed like they have been leading up to this confrontational day. The two pals also duke it out if Zero isn't taken over by the Stigma virus, but only because he is falsely accused by some dumb lifesavers to be a Maverick, and I just didn't buy into that. Zero himself even says he didn't expect to fight X over such a trivial matter, which cements for me that it's a lame excuse. All that being said, my biggest complaint regarding the story isn't so much the story itself as it is a part of the intertwining gameplay execution. Those familiar with Mega Man X5 will know exactly where I am going with this. It is decided by the game's RNG, or random number generator, full out whether or not the Enigma actually ends up blowing up the space colony. The odds of it succeeding do grow higher the more parts for it are collected from the Mavericks, but even with all 4 enhancements amassed for the thing, it rarely succeeded for me. If, by good fortune, the Enigma plan does actually work out, the Earth is saved and you're guaranteed the good ending upon game completion. However, since this bastard is so prone to failing, the Maverick Hunters have a backup prepared in the form of the space shuttle. If this bad boy succeeds, you've achieved practically the same results as if the Enigma did so, only at a later point. But if you're ill-fated enough to have the shuttle also pooping the bed, the space colony collides with the planet and you're guaranteed the bad ending after defeating Sigma. It's worth mentioning that, from what I've gathered, the likeliness of the shuttle properly destroying the space colony is significantly greater than the Enigma doing so. But even for this device, you are always at the mercy of the game's RNG, whichever way you shake it. I've got the bad ending twice with all the necessary pieces collected before firing the shuttle. Plain and simple, guys, this gimmick blows. Not only is it convoluted and difficult to grasp as a newcomer, I mean, I had to resort to a wiki to understand what the hell I was dealing with, if that's any indication. It's also just not fair of the game to flip the bird to players who collected the items they were encouraged to. I fail to see any type of added value from having such a weird setup where the course of the adventure and the ending you get is dependent on luck. Honestly, if the project director was just hell-bent on having some funky feces like this in Mega Man X5, I would have suggested merely one solution to combat the space colony. Give it 8 collectible parts, and with each the success rate grows an additional 12.5%, making for a total of 100%. That way there would have been clearly defined rules for the player and no doubts about getting the good ending if the 8 main stages are beaten. Combined with an actively ticking, real-time clock, I think this would have made for a superior game mechanic. If you're starting to run out of time, do you try to beat 1 or 2 more stages to increase your odds of rescuing the planet, or do you feel too pressured, activate the device now and hope luck is in your favor? Just add multiple autosave triggers in every level that operate in the background and it shouldn't be massively exploitable either. As for the countdown that actually is present in Mega Man X5, basically every time you enter a level you lose a full hour, and considering there are 8 main stages and 2 self-contained boss fights tucked in between those, it's so lenient that I feel you'd only ever run out of time on purpose. The countdown obviously also stops when the Enigma or shuttle manages to obliterate the space colony, making even revisits to earlier stages to find remaining items largely a non-issue. For the curious viewers out there immersed this far into my sexy video, in case the 16 hours do pass without any resistance from the player, the bad ending is set in stone. Now, the moment the space colony either impacts the Earth or is destroyed, the franchise's traditional set of last stages that lead up to the final Sigma battle become freely accessible. This means that, yes, you can skip the 8 main levels at your leisure if you don't care about getting the bad ending, and if by some miracle the shuttle or even the Enigma succeeds without any of their enhancement parts, you can even score the good ending in addition. While most people would say such an option is very strange and unconventional, unconventional, I actually think it's kinda cool. Very skilled players can attempt to beat the game in a shorter time span without all the extra power-ups you would acquire from the regular Mavericks, for speedrunners or whatever you can think of. It's optional, so it doesn't hinder the game if you don't want it to, and it can enhance replay value for those searching for it. Unfortunately, what sucks is that the events leading up to the bad ending predictably see Zero getting infected by the Sigma virus and thus turning into a Maverick. From a story perspective, this isn't very harmful in my eyes. In fact, don't you think it would have been interesting to see Evil Zero kill off X for good and team up with Sigma? I understand that the then upcoming Mega Man Zero lineup for the Game Boy Advance wouldn't tie into that, but they could have made it a non-canon ending, if anything. The true, enormous shot in the gonads, though, comes in that Zero going Maverick robs you of the ability to play as him. Just to clarify in advance, X5 no longer forces you to play through the entire game as either X or Zero. It allows you to pick between them every time you dispatch for your next mission, which, for the record, I think is a cool addition. Players can experiment with whom of the two characters works best for each stage and customize a playthrough around it for optimal performance. It's that extra layer of depth and replayability, you know? With that said, if Zero unintentionally goes Maverick and you lose him as a playable character as a result, you could be kinda boned. In the best case scenario, you've been playing as and decking out X with upgrades and such as well, but if you've been sticking to Zero an entire playthrough and intended to finish all of it as him, you have to go out of your way to find fancy stuff for your naked blue X in the 8 main stages first. The alternative is to get struck by a brutal difficulty spike in the last stretches of the game. You see, the returning heart containers are not shared between the two heroes, and acquiring one as Zero means you can no longer get it as X or vice versa. The newly introduced choice between gaining some extra health or weapon energy after clearing stages as well goes by the same rule. Now, having to distribute the health and energy increasements across the two heroes as you see fit would be perfectly fine by me for strategy purposes in itself. It is the possibility of losing Zero lurking around the corner that makes me question it heavily. To be fair, though all heart containers can be gotten as X, half of them cannot be gotten as Zero, meaning the other half will always be left for X in case you do lose Zero. The various tanks and their stored energy are thankfully shared between X and Zero too, so you will be able to use those. While I find that inconsistent with the handling of the heart containers, there is at least some leniency there if you've managed to snoop up the two sub-tanks and weapon tank as Zero. In spite of these positive nuances, I feel like pumping everything into Zero, losing him and then being boned with X isn't at all a fair situation to get into, and the developers should not have allowed for it. This is the main reason, above the evil non-canon ending I mentioned earlier, why I believe Zero should have remained playable regardless of him being a protagonist or an antagonist. The problem is further accentuated by the arbitrary character selection upon a fresh save file, and I'll get to the specifics for why that is in a bit. So, on a surface level, your pick here dictates who you control in the introduction area, but there is more to it than meets the eye. If you select X, you can wear X's 4th armor from X4 throughout this entire game, if you wish to, with its 50% damage reduction, mid-air dash, and hover mechanics and all. It's not wholly identical, as it has 50% weapon energy reduction instead of 100% reduction, the plasma ball arm cannon is no longer capable of penetrating through walls, and the Nova Strike move has been stripped out. Now, if you select Zero on this screen, he can use his Z-Buster for the remainder of this playthrough. Problemo numero uno with this, the choice should not have been presented in the fashion of a character select in my opinion. Doing so just makes things unclear, and I would prefer being asked if I want to have the 4th armor or the Z-Buster. Secondly, the 4th armor arguably makes many parts of the game far too easy despite it being nerfed somewhat, while the Z-Buster is very lackluster by comparison. Its shots are small and lack oomph, you're locked in place when firing it, and it takes a brief moment to charge, leaving you open to enemy fire. There are perhaps 2 or 3 predicaments where I recall the thing contributing in a way other techniques couldn't do for me, but that's where it about ends. The 2 offerings definitely should have been more balanced from my experience, the 4th armor less powerful and the Z-Buster more useful. It would not only tone the 4th armor down a necessary notch, it would also make choosing between it and the Z-Buster more of a dilemma worth taking seriously. Finally, to tie back into my discussion on the pumping everything into Zero, losing him and then being boned with X situation, the last couple stages really aren't simple to beat, even with X's 4th armor. It is more so the 8 main levels where I feel that armor mitigates a lot of the challenge to a worrisome degree. The thing is, as soon as Zero turns into a Maverick, you're no longer obliged to clear any of the main stages anyway, as I've addressed earlier. The focus is all on the last levels that ultimately lead to Sigma. If the player picked Zero on the initial character select screen and he or she loses him to the RNG crap, why oh why could the developers not show some mercy and grant the 4th armor at this point, or something comparable? After all, Zero is gone, and so is his E-Saber, which you may have chosen over the 4th armor without even being aware of it.
But Retropolis Zone, you can reload your save file and try to manipulate the Enigma and shuttle operation outcome into the desired outcome.
Well, that is if you know they're RNG based in the first place, and that is if you know there are a bad and good ending in the first place, because the game sure as shit has not and will not inform you about any of this. Realistically, a newcomer is probably gonna carry on, save their progress soon enough, and lose the reloading privilege. There is kind of a silver lining here, and that is that, ignoring the ultimate armor, there are no less than 2 collectible armors for X packed into X5, so you can still get those, and assuming he can reach them, Zero can collect the armor parts contained in the Dr. Light capsules when he is still playable. And that is nice, because even generally speaking, it would be super annoying if you had to revisit the stage as X just because Zero couldn't accept the armor parts for him. On the flip side, however, I just can't seem to stop pointing out flaws here. The game always requires you to find all 4 pieces of a specific armor for X before he can wear any of it at all. You cannot just, for instance, obtain a torso part and reap the benefits of 50% damage reduction there and then, like you could in X1 to X4. This was probably done as to prevent the player from mixing and matching parts from the different armors, but a less detrimental solution would have simply been to force you to choose between the currently possessed parts of one or the other armor when entering a stage, if need be at a Dr. Light capsule for extra convenience. Let's try and leave behind the pumping everything into Zero, losing him and then being boned with X issue though, and nicely segue into the new armors themselves that can be acquired this time around, now that I was bringing them up. To get the most broken one covered, there is the aforementioned ultimate armor for X. This thing is ultimately the same as the 4th armor, only it brings back the Nova Strike and with infinite juice for the attack on top of that, which wreaks some serious havoc upon the remainder of the game. Those who have a curious eye may locate it somewhere in the second to last stage, but you need to have entered the level as Naked Blue X. I don't really like that condition, since you need to exit or finish the stage before you can wear the ultimate armor in the first place, but what can you do? Zero can also become Black Zero in the same spot, for some reason immediately, unlike X, which allows the dude to destroy energy shots, grants him a power boost, and marks the first time he can wear any type of suit expansion in the series without cheat codes. I think there is a certain charm to secrets like these, and taking into account their hidden nature so late into the game, I am not bothered about them being massively OP. Now, the armors you are more likely to get your greedy, dirty hands on, you motherfucker, are the Falcon armor and the Gaia armor for X. Both of these offer the standard 50% damage reduction and have their own variations of the Giga attack, but the rest of the features differ quite significantly. It's best to think of the Falcon armor as a tool that completely destroys platforming challenges and many stage layouts on the whole, really, because you can fly in whichever direction your heart craves for around 5 seconds, I believe. In the moment you're doing this, touch damage rolls are also reversed, meaning you become resistant against it while vulnerable enemies are rapidly hit. Against bosses, you'll be singing a bit of a different tune because flying through them drains health from neither parties, and the charge capabilities of the Falcon armor leave something to be desired. Weapon energy usage is still half, but you cannot charge secondary firearms at all, and the charge buster shot is so thin and weak that boss battles can become kind of a hassle and drag drag on as such. The Gaia armor in contrast, boss murderer. They become pushovers as your buster shot is fully charged in a flash, so you can inflict wicked damage rapidly fast as a result. Drastic downsides to the Gaia armor are that secondary weapons cannot be fired, period. Your buster shots, though quick and powerful, don't reach across the entire screen, and your movement and dash speed are decreased, limiting your overall mobility. This can make the act of reaching bosses kinda clunky, causing many people to write the armor off as a piece of shit that's only good for traversing or climbing spiked surfaces, which otherwise kill you instantly upon contact. Originally, I shared this sentiment, but then I tested the armor against bosses, and boy oh boy was I not disappointed. In their case, the limitations largely aren't a hindrance. When you pitch the Falcon armor and Gaia armor against each other, it mostly boils down to pissing over stages versus pissing over bosses respectively, which by itself I think is a-okay. The armors are pretty darn cool to mess around with, and they aid the player in totally separate manners. My complaint here is that you cannot complete the Gaia armor without completing the Falcon armor beforehand, since two parts of the former are only reachable by flying to them, and in case you forgot, you need all the parts for an armor in order to wear it. I don't like this setup. I'd much prefer both being completable separately, but I do have a very sneaking suspicion of why the designers went with it. Out of the 4 stages housing a Falcon armor part, 3 of them also contain a heart container that can only be obtained with the help of the Gaia armor. This means in the ideal planned out scenario, you need to revisit 3 stages at least once, and you'll notice that the heart containers here were conveniently tucked away past the halfway point, or at worst at the end of the level even. If you have any doubts that the goal was to pad out this quest, let's quickly examine Duff McWhalen's stage, shall we? You need the weapon from this very level's boss to acquire the Falcon armor part here, making for revisit number 1. Other perfectly plausible solutions do not work for some artificial reason, and in order to obtain the heart container that is so nearby it's not even funny, you must have the Gaia armor on you, making for revisit number 2. In simpler terms, if you want to get everything, you'll be going through more or less 66% of this stage 3 times. And to make matters worse, it's an auto-scroller that moves along at a snail's pace. It's ludicrously boring, and overall the item fetching is the worst the series has seen so far. I should bring mention to the fact collecting items isn't nearly as tedious and back and forthy as Zero, but that's only because about half of the shit either isn't even within his power to get or offers him nothing of any value. Additionally, the fun and mystique in much of this is pretty darn lacking too. When the heart containers aren't locked off in an area that demands the Gaia armor, they often require little thought to get to or are in plain sight, and the numerous armor pieces are mostly obviously placed with no tricky practices involved. There are a handful of cool ideas I'll shout out, like having to solve a mini puzzle with these containers in Axel the Red stage, or navigating a controllable rocket through a narrow space to hit a switch on the other side. If I can give credit where credit is due, I'll happily do so, people, but then there's collecting the 8 energy balls on the returning speed bike in Squid Adler stage, which can kiss my ass, and burning wooden locks with fire, which is recycled from X4. By the way, I just got the EX tank here for a default of 4 lives instead of 2, but game overs in X5 always return you to the last checkpoint. While I generally appreciate this improvement over X4, lives and thus the EX tank mean jack squat. That barely has a negative impact on the experience or anything, but it goes to show how remiss X5's design can be. How the game puts a little faith in the player to discover and realize things by their own accord is another prime example. With the exception of the last few stages, Alia calls you and halts your progression on a frequent basis. She does so to tell you to watch out for spikes you couldn't imagine to overlook, or to spoon feed you how certain stage gimmicks work. Look, you can button mash your way through the advice and dialogue very swiftly, yes, but sometimes you are interrupted with not even 3 seconds to spare, and the simple fact of the matter is, this shouldn't be forced upon the player to boot. You've got these new, worthwhile options for rapid fire and auto charge, and a completely pointless feature to play the game at 50% speed, but then for some ungodly reason it is impossible to turn off Alia's continuous nagging. That is something I have no tolerance for, and what boggles the mind is that she never outright tells you about X5's new ability to duck in the mandatory introduction level. The optional secondary tutorial area mentions crouching, but who's gonna sit through that snooze fest if they don't have to? Granted, you'll find out about the ducking simply by playing the game and accidentally pressing down sooner or later. But what is going on with Alia not clearing that one up, yet persistently babysitting you at so many other parts of the adventure? Speaking of the crouch maneuver, I will gladly state that is a basic yet brilliant addition to the movesets of X and Zero. It makes taking out short and tiny enemies a more efficient and hassle-free procedure, and it allows for some small extra depth to the level design and boss fights. Whether it's ducking under obstacles or spikes, a giant laser wailing down across the screen vertically, or an opponent flying over your head in close range, I wouldn't be dazed if I turn out to miss the ability to crouch when going back to Mega Man X1 to X4. Another great, fresh mechanic is traversing ropes via your hook device. Earlier on, it's just used to cross pits, but it manages to expand upon itself a bit by blending together in clever ways with stages, sending enemies your way to avoid bullets from and to shoot up, and adding in spinning hazards that you have to carefully time a dash under. There is some missed potential, probably. I think they could have done more with it if they tried, but its addition shouldn't bother anyone as it is well integrated, and if you ask me, also quite fitting for the series. Mega Man X5, on the whole, has a handful of cool stage concepts to minimize repetition and monotony. Grizzly Slash's stage sees players moving from truck to truck and eventually rushes them to abandon exploding vehicles that are going to vanish underneath their feet. And Volcano Inferno is all about picking your moments to avoid getting hit by Dragon Head spitting fire or a ginormous passing lava wave that can burn you alive in an instant. This level even splits into two pathways, 50% in. One where you travel in a ride armor, punching all the robots that come along in the guts, and one where you're chased by a dragon while platforming your way to safety. Perhaps my favorite gimmick is found in Squid Adler stage, where you have to land multiple hits on these switches in order to open the corresponding shutters. The catch is that the shutters close again rather quickly after you open them, and as you advance further, two shutters are constantly stacked right after one another in different room layouts for you to get accustomed to. While some people may view this as tiring more than something to praise, to me it shakes up the gameplay and gives the area its own identity. Some levels are more standard with all the focus on Mega Man's iconic running and gunning, or Zero's hacking and slashing since X4 as well, but even then you'll often notice nuances to set them apart. If that isn't through different visual and enemy design, it is Axel the Red stage sprinkling in the new rope mechanics, or Izzy Glow's castle having a fine mixture of combating foes, platforming, and climbing vertical shafts. Further supporting the stages is that they are built well and thoughtfully. Generally speaking, I'll get to the exceptions afterwards. Threats are often telegraphed in some fashion, allowing observant players to take advantage of the situation. My best example is the vine-type object that appears to blindside you out of nowhere in Axel the Red stage, even above bottomless pits. Now, in reality, they always have a little green tip sticking out of the roof or floor before they pop up, and you're introduced to the first 4 of them in a safe, confined area for you to learn that they are indeed visible beforehand. Therefore, it is 100% fair, in my eyes anyway, in case you do get thrown off later in a more lethal environment. The attention to detail is mostly good, like how you can use the Sea Slasher or Sea Sword to disable the anti-security systems in Izzy Glow's castle that spawn moving energy balls, but even if you don't have that weapon, it's been ensured you can avoid taking damage. I've tested it, it's just harder to do. It's also really cool that the virus heads that sometimes follow you around in stages drain excess health when he's infected too much, whereas Zero temporarily becomes invincible and gets health replenished. This makes sense within the story context, and this is the type of nuanced care that can elevate a game to greatness. Regardless of all these favorable statements, I do think situations where you may be driven into by a car from outside the borders of the screen or shot at by birds above you with projectiles while trying to scale a wall occur a tad more than I am comfortable with. You can brush off such moments of cheap and grating enemy placement, sure, but I couldn't help but feel X5 let them slip through the cracks noticeably more than X4. Yes, the level design, shamefully enough, is a far cry from perfect, with 2 other issues I want to discuss. The first one is that the pacing could have been handled better in places. The biggest culprit favorite would be Duff McWhalen's stage, which, as I've explained before, crawls along agonizingly slow. I like the idea of being chased by a mini-boss throughout, but I wish the stage gave you more to occupy your mind with and jacked up the overall speed of the auto-scrolling. The Reploid Air Force level also has elevators that make no haste to carry you up and down through the area, with again hardly anything to dodge or do in these instances, and the first half of Dark Dizzy's stage, it has a slowdown gimmick in addition to a floating platform that you have to plant your feet on for a long time to reach the end, unless you have the Falcon armor. Bio Laboratory and X4 has a slow elevator sequence, before I hear that argument, but the difference is that it kept throwing enemies and dangerous obstacles at you from beginning to end. It was also short and very exclusive, a deliberate contrast to the rest of the game's snappy and self-controlled progression. Initially, X5's mentioned pacing quirks aren't likely to get on your nerves that much, but on repeated playthroughs or when you have to come back to levels for items, you might just withdraw your viewpoint of that Retropolis own douchebag being overly picky about it. Furthermore, a heavy trial and error rears its ugly head on multiple occasions. For the sake of time, I won't go in depth into the bombs in the Reploid Air Force level that sip away a ton of health when you fail to defuse them, which, trust me, will happen a few times as a newcomer, and you'll have to take my word that the speedy bike carried over from X4 is somehow worse to sit on here, even though it gets much less screen time. Both of these are frustrating endeavors, no doubt about it, but the Quickman stage homage is the legit deal. This atrocious level has instant KO lasers that burn you to bits before you can say fuck as soon as you come in their line of fire, and the camera is mostly at fault here because it refuses to pan down where you desperately want it to. In other stages, that can be an annoyance in a similar vein to X4, but in this hellhole, it is a fatal design flaw. The lasers are impossible to predict because you haven't a single clue from where they will surprise you, and even assuming you've memorized most of them, your movement has to be near perfect to survive. Activating the Darkhold will momentarily freeze your surroundings, and thus the lasers as well, but that evokes the opposite problem of much of the challenge being completely gone. Besides, the Darkhold isn't a substitute for bad camera and instant kill hazard placement. In conclusion, I think the quality of the level design is inconsistent. While I thoroughly enjoy stages such as Izzy Glow, Squid Adler, not counting the shitty bike portion, and Exel the Red, there are also stages that are severely hindered by the described flaws, like Duff McWhalen, the Skyver, and Dark Dizzy. Even though I'd argue X5's overall level design is competent with great highs, it's also got its share of low points, making it inferior to X4's overall level design from my observations. If it means anything to you, I did find myself using the secondary firearms over the Buster more here than I did in X4. The F-Laser isn't my cup of tea since you must stand still in order to use it, and the Wing Spiral I merely use to get rid of little buggers above me, but much of the rest is sweet stuff. By far my most used weapon is the Tri-Thunder, which shoots out electric bolts before, above, and below X, and they can even crawl along surfaces. As such, it's very easy to hit foes coming from multiple directions, and it's quite powerful too. The Spike Ball blasts forward in a devastating blow that kicks enemies' lights out without any pardon, although only for certain enemies, and of course the Darkhold's temporary time freezing capability is a magnificent tool to breeze through sections that you'd otherwise make a rough showing on. Now, to rephrase what I said in the X4 review, I am not the guy to come to for a deep and thoughtful analysis on Mega Man weapons and how they can be used in various situations. I apologize for that, but I will say many of their properties seem lifted straight out of previous classic Mega Man and Mega Man X titles. Perhaps again as references, but they might have gone a bit overboard with the familiarity. As for Zero's techniques, they're largely similar to their X4 counterparts, only with some welcome variations or tweaks. Don't quote me on this, but the screw attack's damage output seems lowered in favor of the other techniques getting more utility, which is a good thing, and the upgraded mid-air dash now allows you to nudge slightly up or down and soar through enemies and certain hazards scratch-free. The forward Raijin Geiki Whip has been removed and enjoys no replacement, while the fire/uppercut has transformed into an electric blade, and the downwards thrust is now fiery instead of icy. If Zero's assortment of moves clicked with you in X4, then it ought to do so in X5 as well. On a final note, I do like that a few more of his techniques are reliant on weapon energy now, as that alleviates the blatant problem of the weapon tank serving next to no purpose in X4 for Zero. As far as I'm concerned, almost, if not all of Zero's techniques should have a juice meter like X's weapons do, but you know, the signs of improvement are present. Now, next to the staple weapons, techniques, and upgrades found throughout the series, X5 also sports the wholly new and exclusive parts system. The functionalities of said parts can range from simple conveniences such as receiving more energy from health pickups or reducing weapon energy usage by 50%, to enhanced mobility with higher jumps or generally faster movement, to an instant charge shot for X without the need to load it up, or an extended Z-Saber for Zero that can reach farther. There are a total of 16 different parts in the game, and you can acquire a maximum of 8 in a single playthrough, though the number you can equip at a time varies. Zero and Unarmored X can both install 4 parts, the 4th armor and the Falcon armor allow for a maximum of 2 parts, and the Gaia armor doesn't support any parts. Mercifully, you are free to swap parts in and out as you please, so nothing's permanent, and it's an added plus that it balances out the numerous armors slightly more. Conceptually, I can get behind this. More customizability, more replayability. But the developers just had to make the entire feature far more confusing and perplexing than they needed to. Seemingly randomly, you'll start seeing this plus at the end of the options weapon and life and weapon and energy after clearing stages. While life and energy are relatively straightforward, it could still be a little clearer. To be sincere, this plus correlates to a specific part of the aforementioned parts system. My question is, how am I supposed to know that? I mean, Alia is unable to give me but a smidge of insight on the workings behind the parts because she is too busy preparing to tell me to climb the vines that I am clearly frickin' seeing, thank you. To add insult to injury, you have no clue what part you are ending up with. You're essentially forced to choose between 2 options, both of which are lacking crucial information in the plus department. It's so unintuitive and it absolutely weirded me out initially. I once more had to resort to online guides to get myself up to speed. I seriously recommend some kind of table or list that lays out for you how to obtain the desired parts, if you plan to dive into them, that is, because it'll be a nightmarish trial and error task to figure out yourself. To add even more to the confusion, what triggers the plus to appear to begin with? In quick summary, they appear when bosses of level 8 or higher are defeated. A Maverick's level is determined by a couple of behind-the-scenes variables like how many stages you've cleared, your current rank that is labeled on your save file, etc, etc, but the most manipulatable factor is how many hours are remaining until collision. Essentially, you must waste time by entering and exiting stages until the first boss you fight will be of at least level 8 in order to meet that maximum amount of 8 parts per playthrough. It's worth mentioning as well that on the game's easy difficulty, Mavericks are always fixed at level 1, regardless of whatever, meaning that the entire part system is non-existent when playing on easy. Oh right, Mega Man X5 is the first one in this sub-series to have a difficulty selection. Previous installments always had the player dictating the level of challenge by how many items and upgrades he or she amassed. While that element is still here and accounted for, you can now flick that difficulty switch between easy, normal, and extreme in addition, with increasingly more obstacles and enemies plastered throughout the stages as you move up. I have no issue with this, as normal is set by default, and another means of lowering or increasing the challenge besides the items and upgrades is a nice gesture. I thought extreme was pretty hard, but there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I quite enjoyed getting through it, though some stages felt a little cheap and awkward more than anything else. I should clarify, however, that this review has largely been based on the normal difficulty setting. So if certain facts or opinions I've stated so far don't apply on easy or extreme as much, that's simply because I've performed much more playtesting on normal than the other two. Nevertheless, no matter which difficulty I went with, all of the Mavericks are a piece of cake to defeat as Zero. I don't know why he was made as powerful against these guys as he was, but geez, you can brute force most of the battles and easily come out victorious. Yes, even on extreme. It's so glaring, oftentimes, that the Z-Saber is more beneficial beneficial to use than techniques deemed as effective. Not necessarily because the blade deals more damage, but because you can proceed slashing away without the boss AI breaking from the weaknesses. In all fairness, as both X and Zero, the Mavericks overall don't suffer from Spark Mandrill Syndrome as much as in X4. Some tend to attack you or move around during their invincibility frames, or sometimes you don't even have enough weapon ammunition to drain close to the full health bar, as is the case with the Skyver. That said, the problem, while maybe less severe than in X4, is still a thing to a notable degree in X5, and what makes it, in a different sense, worse than before is how obnoxiously long it takes for a couple of the Mavericks, not all of them, to become vulnerable again. Just take a look at Metrix when I attack him with the wing spiral. He dangles and bounces around for like 5 seconds before he's open to fire again. During the first encounters with the Mavericks, this is bearable, but when you reach the boss rush on normal and extreme, where the length of all the health bars gives my third leg a run for his money, shit just drags on and on. I'm all for making the rematches with the main 8 bosses harder in the boss rush to compensate for having the appropriate tools by then. But this and this weren't the solutions I was hoping for. Granted, it's mostly a nuisance with X, seeing how Zero's Z-Saber is so powerful that you hardly need to rely on secondary techniques, but the other side of the coin is that much of the thrill was completely zapped out of Zero's campaign because the bosses just aren't properly balanced around him at all. I am relieved to say then that they are at least still fun to take on with Unarmored X and his standard buster. While Grizzly Slash is perhaps too easy and slow of an opponent, and Dark Dizzy a, well, fucking pathetic opponent because I never died once on him or took damage for that matter across 8 total playthroughs, I would say the remaining bosses all have their own merits. Duff McWhalen is somewhat of a gimmicky battle with mild platforming and avoiding the streak of ice cubes fired at you to prevent yourself from landing in the spikes on the wall, but I think his uniqueness alone is worth the price of admission. As for one of my favorite Mavericks though, that would be the Skyver. To sum him up, he's Storm Eagle 2.0, basically, constantly charging at you and eventually flying into the screen from different directions, all in an attempt to knock you off the platform and thus win the battle in an instant. This dude keeps you focused and on your toes, which is the type of kick I seek in boss fights. But even he falls short of being as awesome as Squid Adler. I have a peculiar feeling many folks despise this nephew of Launch Octopus from X1, but damn do I love the setup here. Utilizing the vertically tall structure of the room and the objects therein to successfully maneuver around Squid Adler himself and his numerous electrical attacks that can crawl along the walls and floor makes for an intense and technical fight that puts your dashing and wall climbing skills to a great test. Dare I say, this is one of the finest boss battles in the X series I've experienced because it seems so well and specifically built for the character's moveset. Taken on the whole, I think I enjoyed X4's fight somewhat more. Why exactly I cannot pinpoint, but don't preach that as gospel because most of the ones in X5 still left me engaged and satisfied. You know, as long as I stuck to Naked X and ignored Steamroller Zero. As such, I'm also happy that X5 carries on that tradition of making the 8 main bosses very beatable as first picks. Thank God.
I've not seen such bravery.
Unfortunately, many bosses of the endgame frustrate me in one way or another. The Shadow Devil, while decent overall, becomes obnoxious because he at some point starts stacking you in between 2 towers and shooting at you from both directions, which I doubt more than 1% of the world population has the reaction speed for, and the Rang the Bang that sports instant kill surprise spikes that materialize from out of the walls you're trapped in at random locations. I like how the 3 eyeballs here come with their own attacks to deal with for more meat to the bones, but the spikes leave a sour taste in my mouth every time unless I use the Gaia armor. The face-off against Zero, be he good or evil, also couldn't be more disappointing. The only reliable method I've personally found to avoiding his ridiculously fast Giga attack is to jump over Zero's head, but doing so triggers the idiot to spam the move again. Ultimately, this is what the fight amounts to if you want to refrain from getting trapped in a war of attrition, and I assume it requires no explanation why that's bad. I feel you're in for a more worthy fight against X, if only because his ambushes are properly dodgeable without some kind of trick that breaks his AI. Finally, for the showdown against Sigma himself, I think it's one of the better ones between the 5 installments so far. It doesn't have an easy, time-wasting first phase like in X1 or X4, and the 2 phases that do exist scale along naturally in difficulty and are all around fair and challenging, even with many upgrades amassed. The only gripe I have are the purple blocks that materialize literally out of thin air in the second phase. They take you by surprise, suck up a ton of health, and if you're like me and desperately start chugging away your sub-tanks in the hope to survive but then still die anyway, you run into the same issue as you do in X4. No way to efficiently refill your sub-tanks here, and using a farming spot elsewhere in the game, if you can find one, I haven't managed to, means redoing the boss rush first in order to reach Sigma again. Fantastic, especially with these long-ass health bars on the Mavericks. The visual design of Sigma also kind of struck me as effortless, to be honest. I mean, in the first phase, the animations look really stock and unimpressive compared to Sigma's fluidity found in X4, and the second phase, it's just a pre-rendered background with no movement at all. Another instance of this is the staircase sequence in Izzy Glow's castle, with the scrolling stairs being a still image as well. It looks really cheap and out of place. Admittedly, the staircase section in Biolaboratory in X4 was also funky to the eyes, but it didn't convey itself as badly with the better camera perspective. The graphics, in general, feel rushed and lazy at points in X5. When the big fire wave passes in the metric stage, you get this rough-looking square outcut around you, and 3 out of the 4 final levels come with the exact same background, just with a different color value applied each time. The presentation could have used more work too. The Maverick selection screen looks muddy, static, and has nothing on the fanciness found in X4, and I wish there were more drawings, or at the minimum, more animation in the drawings during cutscenes. Don't take this as me saying X5's visuals are crap, because most of the 8 main stages look fine with nice, diversified themes and aesthetics. I just think X4's art was more cohesive and less rough around the edges. To wrap up this excessively long Mega Man X5 review, there is the soundtrack. One thing I can immediately applaud it for is that it really enhances the story and apocalyptic tone of the game. For example, the moment Zero goes Maverick and invites X for the decisive battle over a video chat, you hear this chilling song giving off vibes of uncertain tranquility with a slow beat, harsh hitting snares, and underlying chores. There's also the melancholic credits theme, which starts off eerily fragile and mysterious, rolls into a sad, classical piano piece, and climaxes with a synthesized melody that perfectly instills the pain of loss. Much of the rest of the score for stages is more traditional Mega Man X affair, meaning Japanese synth rock is back in all its glory. Though there are also tracks that kind of venture into the Sonic Adventure flavor of rock, like what's heard in the intro of the video. There is certainly more variety in X5 selection than there is in X4's in terms of instrumentation, and for that I think X5 has not necessarily more memorable or catchy stuff, but a more captivating sound during gameplay. Hell, remixes of older Mega Man tunes like Deep Sea Bass from Mega Man X2, Quickman Stage from Mega Man 2, and the Yellow Devil theme from Mega Man 1 are also delightfully thrown in. Again, there's no point in me ranking the soundtrack in relation to other X installments because I am indecisive and don't care much to do so to begin with. All I can really tell you is that I think X5's music fits the game's events remarkably well and that I enjoy it for what it is. Have a listen to another badass track. Fans and lovers of Mega Man X5, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I have to agree with the popular mixed opinion. While I think Mega Man X1, X2, and X4 are excellent games worth the time and money, I noticed things going somewhat haywire here and would say this is possibly the weakest entry out of the 5. Don't misunderstand me, I believe there was passion behind X5 and there are certainly parts to like about it, such as the exquisite atmosphere of the story. However, where X4 may have played things a bit too safe but was overall polished and well made, X5 appears to embody the polar opposite of cramming in as many elements as possible with a lack of care and proper thought behind a lot of them. The familiar core experience is very playable and one I generally enjoyed my time with regardless, but when setting up a critical analysis for Mega Man X5, it evidently comes to light what a convoluted mess the full package is. Does that make the game bad? Absolutely not, but it falls well short of being the awesome finale it should have been in my opinion. By all means, I still recommend you give it a chance if you are well versed in the X titles or if you own the collection on PlayStation 2 or GameCube. Just be sure to get to the preceding installments before this one.